Hello, I'm Philip Sales. In this video, I'm interviewing Michelle Dyson, a government lawyer. We'll be talking about the process within a government department for working up a policy proposal for legislation. Michelle, what are the circumstances in which legislation comes to be proposed?
There are a number of different ways in which legislation can be proposed. I mean, most obviously, I suppose, is a manifesto commitment, or what we've got under the current government, a coalition commitment. So, for example, the coalition has made it one of its top commitments to introduce legislation to free up state schools from local authority control. So they've now introduced a bill, the Academies Bill, to do that. So that would be your first way in which legislation comes to be proposed. You might have emergency legislation. So straight after 9/11, we had the Anti-Terrorism, Crime and Security Act 2001, where they passed legislation to detain foreign terrorist suspects, legislation that was subsequently struck down by the House of Lords. More recently, you've had emergency legislation, again about terrorist suspects, in this case the assets of terrorists. The Supreme Court, in this case, struck down the legislation under which the assets were detained, and the government passed emergency legislation as a short-term measure to enable those assets to continue to be held.
And what about the Law Commission? Does that propose legislation?
That does propose legislation. I mean, the Law Commission just recommends things to government, so it's still for the government to take forwards the legislation. But you do have quite a number of acts on the statute book which originated with the Law Commission. A recent example is the Bribery Act 2010, which initiated with a Law Commission report. And sometimes you'll just have legislation that responds to an immediate sort of public pressure. So the bad example that's always given is the Dangerous Dogs Act. You know, people always say repent at speed and legislate at speed and repent at leisure. But you'll have numerous examples of that sort of thing, where there's an absolute sort of public outcry about something and the government brings forwards legislation to address that issue. And I suppose, I mean, at the moment, you'll be looking at, I would guess, a lot of legislation to enable the government to make savings, given the difficult financial situation that we're in.
You're a civil servant or official. What part do officials play in developing the policy proposals for legislation?
All sorts of different roles. I mean, talking about the officials within a department, I mean, I suppose the most central person is the policy official. The policy official's role is to take the idea that comes from the public or comes from the manifesto, or whatever it is, and develop that idea, take it all the way through until it's into legislation, and then to implement it. The policy official will work very closely with ministers as part of that process. You also, on bigger bills, you'll have a bill manager, because a bill is like a sort of a massive project in some ways, really complicated, loads of different people to sort of bring together. When you're in Parliament, you have huge amounts of paper. Every time you're in Parliament, you'll get loads of amendments tabled by opposition MPs. Each amendment has to be, you have to do notes for the minister. So there's a lot of just managing of this big project, and that's the bill manager's job. The bill manager will also deal with handling issues, so looking at relationships, you know, how the bill is likely to go down in Parliament, how it's likely to go down with other sort of interested parties who may lobby in Parliament. So that sort of handling aspect is also the bill manager's job. But on smaller bills, the policy official would deal with all of that as well as the policy. Then you have the lawyer.
And that would be you.
And that would be me. Who would work very closely with the policy official in developing the policy. I mean, obviously the lawyer will also advise on sort of classic legal issues, you know, human rights sort of issues. But probably more of their time will be spent in helping the policy official to develop the policy and working out how you can get a sort of fairly straightforward, possibly policy idea, let's free up schools from local authority control, getting that to the detail of legislation, so getting that into law, is very much a sort of team effort between the policy official and the lawyer.
And who else are on the team? What about how much it's all going to cost?
Yeah, I mean, economists, depending on the nature of the bill, their role may be bigger or smaller depending on the nature of the bill. But every bill, or virtually every bill, you would expect it to have an impact assessment that accompanies it, which is a document that explains what the costs and benefits are of each of the possible options, including the option of doing nothing. And that's normally signed off by the chief economist. And on a bill that's very much, sort of going to cost an awful lot of money, the economists will play a significant role and be a key part of the team.
And how does the minister keep control of this process?
Well, the minister is heavily involved, and so his private office, that is the sort of officials who work directly in his office, a diary secretary and a number of other officials are key players, and it's key for the policy official to sort of form a good relationship with those the people surrounding the minister. They're the people who go to every meeting with the minister. They will be in Parliament with the minister. They'll commission the briefing from officials. They'll just make sure that everything is in order for what their minister needs. They'll also pass back messages from their minister to officials. So they're, if you like, the gatekeeper of the minister.
And one hears sometimes about special advisors. Who are they?
Special advisors, they are technically civil servants, so like the rest of us, but they are political appointees. So they work directly to the minister, and they only stay there as long as the minister himself or herself stays there. They will be looking at the sort of political, party political aspects of the bill that impartial civil servants can't get involved in. There tend to only be, I mean, in my department we have 2 special advisors, so they're spread pretty thin, and how involved they are in the bill will depend on how sort of politically controversial it is. I mean, the other people to mention who are normal civil servants are press office, because it's really important when you're doing a bill for the department. A bill is it's a big investment for the department, likely to have a pretty high profile, and it's important that the department gets across to the public what it believes the benefits are of this, and that's the press office's job. And they'll draft press releases, but in conjunction with the policy official and the lawyer, and you'll have press conferences which the minister will host, but you would expect officials to be there supporting the minister.
So once the government department has set up its team of officials, what do they do?
What do they do? Well, they start to develop the policy ideas. So you might have what seems like quite a straightforward idea, but it needs teasing out. And some of that will actually just be the team sitting around a table and sort of bouncing ideas around and trying to work out what it really means and what the different options are to put to ministers. You'll also want to be looking out for any big legal problems. There are obvious human rights issues that are going to need to be worked around, or you're going to need to take a different tack.
What other legal problems might emerge at that early stage?
I mean, legal issues, maybe not so much of a legal problem, but a legal issue such as you'd want to be looking at for devolution issues. So are you likely to be legislating in devolved territory and therefore need to engage heavily with your counterparts in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland? It is possible to legislate in devolved territory, but you'd need, say in Scotland, you'd need the Scottish Parliament by convention, you'd need the Scottish Parliament to agree to that. So your lawyers would be looking out for that sort of thing. You'd also want to be gathering your data for the impact assessment that I just mentioned, because you want your evidence base to be as strong as possible in terms of understanding the costs and benefits of what you're doing. You'll want to start talking to other government departments who might have an interest to test out how your minister's thinking is going to play in those departments. So I think those are the sort of things you do at the early stages.
And once you've worked through some of those issues, what happens next?
Then you've got to start engaging with your minister. because you wouldn't want to start talking to people outside the department. I mean, it's one thing to talk to people in other departments, but you certainly can't go beyond that until you've got a feel for where your minister stands on all of this. So what you would do is put a submission up to your minister. So that's a written document that sets out the various options. You'll still at this stage be at a reasonably high level of detail, but you could give a sense of where the different options might take you, and you would put a recommendation and just get a feel for where your minister stands on that. And your minister might want a meeting to discuss. Usually, probably your junior minister, although it might be your Secretary of State as well, just to sort of tease out what they think the direction of policy should be.
And once officials have the minister's views, what do they then seek to do?
Well, you'd carry on developing the policy, but a key part of that is going to be talking to your stakeholders. That's your sort of interested parties outside. So maybe there might be a charity that campaigns heavily on this issue, or lobby groups, or you might have people who've written into your minister asking for meetings. All the sort of people who have an interest in the policy area, you'd want to start talking to them. And as part of that, you would probably want to do a formal consultation, which normally means a written document where you allow 12 weeks for people to feed in their views. But before you could launch that, you would need cabinet clearance. So we work on under our constitution, we work on the basis where the cabinet has to clear any sort of significant policy development, and certainly the policy underlying a bill would need cabinet clearance.
And why is cabinet clearance important?
Because you need everyone signed up. You need everyone signed up to what the policy is. You need all. I mean, particularly where other departments have interest. But as I say, we have collective government. So even where other departments don't have interests, their ministers, everyone has to take responsibility for what the policy is.
And what sort of materials would be sent out with a formal consultation document?
Well, for cabinet for the actual
for consultation stakeholders?
You would have an impact assessment. You always have an impact assessment, which is the document that explains the costs and benefits of each of the options that you've looked at. I mean, it might be fairly sketchy at the time of consultation, because part of the purpose of consultation might in fact be to gather further information for the impact assessment.
And what other are there other informal ways of gathering the views of people who might be interested in this particular area of legislation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you might well want to do workshops. You would have meetings with people who you know are interested. I suppose the benefit of a formal consultation is it reaches beyond the people that you know are interested.
And what happens with the results from a formal consultation?
You analyse them and use them to further develop the policy and put further options to your minister.
In our next video, Michelle will be explaining the detailed development of policy proposals for legislation.